Buddy, I call this meeting to order. I apologize that I'm a little late today. Representative Struzzi, you mind starting us with the pledge?
Sure, absolutely.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so let's, there'll be, as a typical session day goes, there'll be lots of members coming in and going, but I want to go ahead now and allow the members that are here to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So, starting, Representative Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative David Rowe from the 85th Legislative District. That's all of Snyder and parts of Union, Juniata, and Mifflin counties.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Brian Smith, I legislate out of the 66th District, which is Jefferson County and Northern Indiana County.
Good morning, everyone. State Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, consisting of all of Columbia County.
State Representative Malou McKenzie, representing the 131st District, part of Northampton County, part of Lehigh County, and part of Montgomery County.
Good morning, Representative Jim Struzzi, 62nd Legislative District, Indiana County.
And feedback. And Representative Tornecker, I'm filling in here for Representative Kail this morning, and represent parts of Adams and Cumberland County. And we have I think a very interesting hearing today. And we know right now that inflation is negatively impacting Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth. During the last couple of years, the cost of groceries, goods, gas, electricity have all increased dramatically. And unfortunately, the governor and the House Democrats believe that we can't make Pennsylvania more competitive by ballooning government. Their position is grow government to solve these issues. Do you know what actually makes us competitive? Historic tax cuts. Pennsylvania House Republicans are fighting for the largest tax cut for working families in Pennsylvania's history because working families in Pennsylvania deserve to keep more of their own hard-earned money. That's why House Bill 2388 invests in hard-working Pennsylvanians and lowers the cost of electricity, takes taxpayer money paid to the state and returns it to its rightful owner, the hard-working Pennsylvania taxpayer. Let's make Pennsylvania more competitive and create more family-sustaining jobs by making this a competitive environment where businesses want to come and where folks want to move to and thrive. HB 233 will save taxpayers more than $13 billion in the next 5 years. So today we have two very great testifiers joining us. Both will share their insight into the Republicans' historic tax cut legislation. And each testifier, we would ask you to give about 3 to 5 minutes. As Chairman Kail always says, well, I won't gavel anybody down, but maybe Senator Rothman. But I'll let you break for testimony. We're going to break because I know Senator Rothman has a hard stop. We're going to allow Senator Rothman to go first, take some questions for him, and then we'll jump over to Mr. Benningfield afterwards, so that's okay. So, Senator Rothman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Ecker, and all the House members. Thank you for having me. And I certainly would love for this to be an exchange. I have as much to learn from you all as you do from me. But I'd like to point out, as we approach our 248th birthday, that we are a nation.
Hey, can you turn on your mic on?
It's on. The green means that. So on July 4th, we'll celebrate our 248th year. We're approaching our 250th birthday. This is a nation that was founded based on tax revolt, right? I mean, we were a nation that equated freedom and taxation, because the more that the government takes of your earnings and your property and your possessions, the less freedom you have. And so I'm proud to say I'm an American that was a country founded on tax revolt, and I'm a Marine, an organization that was founded in a bar, so in Tun Tavern. Art Laffer, the great economist in the 70s and 80s, on a napkin drew a chart where he created the Laffer curve, which said there are two tax rates that produce zero revenue for the government. If you tax at 0% and 100%. because the closer you get to 100%, the more likely you're going to have people not doing the activity. Early in my career in the House, a group of anti-smoking group, whether it was the Lung Association or the Cancer Association, came advocating increasing taxes on cigarettes. And they told me that they had proven in every study that the higher you tax cigarettes, the less people smoke, which made me think, why are we taxing productivity? We ought to be encouraging productivity and having a competitive tax rate. Now, we know in this economy that is both global and certainly money can move, investments move, businesses can move now more easily. Companies are making decisions, businesses are making decisions, and individuals are making decisions based on tax rates. We know, I've talked about it for the last couple of years, we have a huge demographic crisis in Pennsylvania. We are losing ages between 20 and 64. We actually are going to have real decrease in the number of people in Pennsylvania at that age. And those are workers. And if we are going to support any policies, whether it be core functions like roads and courts and or safety nets or anything we want to do as we enter the budget process here in Harrisburg, it costs money. That money comes from the taxpayers, and it comes from the revenue generated by taxes. So historically, in the 1920s, it was actually a Pennsylvanian, the Secretary of Treasury at the time, Mellon, who instituted a series of tax cuts in the 20s, which led to the Roaring 20s and led to great growth in the U.S. industrial economy. And then in the 1960s, the famous John F. Kennedy tax cuts that also saw revenue increase and the economy increase. And then the one is that was closest to my heart. I worked for Jack Kemp in the Kemp-Roth tax cuts, which at the time you can hear the same clamoring from the opposition that, oh, this is going to bankrupt government. Oh, this is going to create deficits. How are we going to pay for this tax cuts? When Ronald Reagan cut the tax rates, and by the time he left office, the federal revenue had actually nearly doubled. So in 7 or 8 years, cutting tax rates increases revenue. Jack Kemp, as I said, was my boss. I worked for him in 1987, 1988. And late in his life, he died younger than he should have, but late in his life, I had a meeting with him. We had lunch in Harrisburg. And he told me one of the mistakes he had made in marketing tax cuts is that you shouldn't talk about cutting taxes, because there are half of the people that hear that and think you're cutting services. Our idea of cutting tax rates, which generates more revenue, should put at ease anybody's concern that this is going to take money away from the government. We want growth. It's the only way we stop inflation. So the Senate last month passed a historic tax cut, as the chairman referenced, lowered the personal income tax to 2.8 from 3.07. It doesn't seem like a big amount, but if you think about 10%, that's pretty substantial. That will help families in Pennsylvania. And also, about 95% of all of our employers pay taxes under the PIT. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We are losing that population to states like Florida, Texas, South Dakota, Nevada, Tennessee. Those are states that do not have personal income taxes. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothman. Members, any questions for Senator? Yep, Representative Ledbetter.
Representative Ledbetter, thank you so much again for your testimony this morning. In your experience, you mentioned the historical context that you're able to draw from, not only within your service to our country, but then also your service to our Commonwealth here within this Capitol building. When we look at those states that are taking our residents, when you look at the last census, Pennsylvania is getting smaller, poorer, and older. And we understand that that momentum is established, and that the discussion this morning is certainly focused on addressing that. But if we were to Pareto our efforts, what is the singular effort that we can make to ensure that we can begin stopping that bleed?
Yeah, and I think you have absolutely right. If you're in a hole, stop digging, right? I mean, you have to at least stop. U.S. News World Report, the last study said that the top 5 out of the 10, the top 5 places to retire, Pennsylvania cities, including Harrisburg was number 1. And I think 7 out of the top 10 were Pennsylvania cities. So we have sent a message, and look, my parents are both in their 80s, and we want people come here, people are moving here to be with their grandkids, but the reality is that we also don't tax pensions, which should be a message that we shouldn't tax production. Now, someone coming to Pennsylvania and bringing their family here, not paying personal income tax, doesn't hurt us because they're not here otherwise. And by the way, we have plenty of taxes in Pennsylvania. You're going to go buy your food, you pay taxes. You go buy your house, you pay taxes. You pay the second largest gas tax in the country. We pay real estate taxes that support our schools and our counties and our libraries. And when you die, we tax you then too. I mean, there are plenty of taxes that we can send a message. And studies have been done. There was a recent poll, hopefully Mr. Benefield will even talk about it, that showed why people move here, and it's for economic opportunity and cost of living and taxes. And they look for states. You can look at the states that are gaining population. And look, I understand the weather has something to do with it, but I think that Pennsylvania has the best weather. I mean, we have all 4 seasons. I mean, sometimes in the same week. I mean, we get the benefit. This is the most beautiful state. We have the greatest natural resources. We have millions of acres of recreational areas and great airports and colleges, and people should come here. So the reason I don't think they're coming here, and the reason certain groups are coming here, is tax rates. So why not try that? So I say stop digging and start trying to promote Pennsylvania for a place to work.
Thank you, Senator. For years and years, families from across the globe came to Pennsylvania seeking opportunity, and we don't want Pennsylvania families now leaving the Commonwealth seeking opportunity because, as you said, we have a tremendous amount of opportunity right here in our home state. So thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Representative Ledbetter. Any other questions? Representative Rowe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The historical context you gave for what tax cuts actually end up meaning for economic growth, consistent, sustainable economic growth, is fantastic. But what about now? I mean, what about do we have other states that have done this well, that have demonstrated that, hey, you're not actually going to bankrupt the state, right? Because one of the things we commonly hear throughout the budget process is something like certain bills or tax cuts or small business reforms like net operating losses. It's too expensive, we can't afford it. But meanwhile, state budgets balloon by $1 billion a year. So what does it mean for Pennsylvania taxpayers that we have learned, not just historically, but today on a contemporary situation? What have other states done? I mean, you have some states that have no income tax, and they're not bankrupt. So what does this mean? What can this mean today for Pennsylvania long term?
Well, and also there's a word of caution, because Kentucky, I talked about the Laffer curve. Kentucky had some tax rates that actually, tax reform that actually backfired. You had the head football coach who was making several $1 million a year, paying nothing, but also getting a pension. So there is a balance, and I do like the fact that we have a flat tax. I think it should apply to everybody, and we shouldn't have, it should be a true flat tax. But we have the most recent, and I saved this for last, one of the first bills I introduced when I got to the House was to cut the corporate net income tax. 9.99% was not only punishing our companies that stayed here, but discouraging anybody from coming here. And in the end of the Wolf administration, to his credit, Governor Wolf signed a step down where it went down. I think the first cut was 1% to 8.99. And guess what happened? Revenue increased in the corporate net income tax by $1.5 billion. What we have said as conservatives, supply-siders, and Kempian and Reagan, pro-economic growth, cut tax rates, create more revenue, actually happened in Pennsylvania. We saw it, and it's continued to happen, despite the fact that the inflation, with these inflation numbers, as was alluded to, in the economy, the labor force challenges. So right there is an example. But I would also, to sort of turn it around, Representative, and you think every time someone talks about a government program, or, if we put $1 million in this, it's going to create $10 million in economic opportunity, or it's dynamic scoring, which is sometimes the case. Well, tax rates are the exact same thing. You can't say this is going to cost you money if you do this. What is the opportunity that we're losing? And I appreciate you bringing up, we call it the Pennsylvania startup penalty. the net operating loss. How many businesses have not come to Pennsylvania? We know is, as we heard earlier, we've lost one congressional seat in the last 50 years. Each year we lost, or each 10 years we lost one. We're losing population, and it's gonna, you know, it's gonna have negative effects on how we're able to take care of the people that are left behind.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So then what does that mean? What do you foresee as being the Pennsylvania budget, the responsible budgeting that we need to then assume? Because obviously if you're cutting a tax rate, you don't want to also then be exponentially continuing to increase spending before those revenues have been realized. And Pennsylvania's budget has not been growing linearly. It's been growing exponentially over the years. So what does that mean we have to do on the budgeting side?
Yeah, we have to do something about the spend, and I mean it'll be one of my great regrets of failure. I came here to the legislature trying to get us to get our spending under control. I thought that was the most important thing. I think that budget, my first budget, was $28 billion. It was only 8 years ago. We're looking at a $45, $46 billion budget. I mean, our household incomes haven't gone up like that. Our GDP hasn't gone up like that. So we do have to do something about that. But the problem is when you have a governor who feels differently about spending, it's hard for the legislature to stop it. And Harrisburg this area likes money. And I just like to remind everybody that money comes from the private citizens. And we have a huge surplus right now, $14 billion. The governor said in his budget address we should give it back to the people. The best way to give it back to the people is a broad-based tax cut. Trying to send out surplus checks or I think sending out checks would simply just exasperate the inflation. We need to change people's behavior and encourage people to come here and also reward the people based on what they're paying in. So, but thank you.
And I know Senator Rothman has to run here, so Senator Rothman, it's always great for you to be back in the House. We appreciate you being here, and as a good friend, I appreciate your testimony, and thanks for sharing your insight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
All right. Next, we're going to allow Nathan Benefield, the Senior Vice President of the Commonwealth Foundation, to testify.
Thank you, Chairman Ecker, and thank you for the members who are here today for the opportunity. Summarizing my testimony, it's going to echo a lot of what Senator Rothman said of why we're here. He does talk about specific tax reform legislation, but really the goal is how do we make Pennsylvania more competitive? How do we make it more attractive for job creators, employers, and for families? And how do we make our citizens more prosperous? And that's really the policy, what our goal is. And I think that's not at all a controversial. It's certainly I think everyone agrees with those goals. It's a question of how we get there. A lot of what I'm talking about, I think, is something that Governor Shapiro, as a candidate, campaigned on, of making Pennsylvania open for business, more competitive, dealing with our regulatory structure, the permitting process, unleashing our energy sector, where we are one of the best. And he's talked about being open for business. He also famously said in his budget address, tired of losing to friggin' Ohio. Now I'm from Ohio, so I will be wearing scarlet and gray on November 2nd. That may be the most controversial thing I say today. But I agree with the governor that Pennsylvania has the opportunity to be a leader in the nation in economic growth and deliver that prosperity and really lead the Northeast with some good policy reform. But what he campaigned on and what he's proposed in his budget are radically opposed. And that's, especially in the area of taxes and spending. He's pointed to the fact that there is money in the bank. He believes we should spend that by having $3 to $6 billion deficits over the next few years, rather than reducing the tax burden on families and businesses and attracting more business to the state. I think you all know some of the economic trends that, where Pennsylvania is. While I was pointing to, hey, we have a low unemployment rate, that kind of undergirds where Pennsylvania actually is in terms of our economic growth. We've lagged the nation in job growth for many decades, but especially since the kind of pre-pandemic levels of job growth. In the last 4 years, Pennsylvania's overall job growth has been 1%. 4 years, 1% growth. The states that are leading the country, states like Idaho and Utah, had 11%. Some of our key competitors with no income tax, like Texas and Florida, have been over 9% job growth in that same time frame. And if we want to be more competitive, we should be looking to those states. Very interesting, those are the exact same states that are winning in the area of migration. Those are attracting residents. Those are where Pennsylvanians are moving to. Meanwhile, we are attracting residents from New York and New Jersey. They're moving here from those states that are among the highest taxed, most regulated in the country. Senator Rothman referred to this, out-migration, losing population. He also mentioned the theory, like, well, maybe it's the weather, that's why people are moving to the south. But you look at the states that are losing population, California is on the list. The weather in California is pretty nice. It's not, they are moving out because of the economic climate there, the tax burden, the regulatory burden. And really, we should be looking not to imitate New York and California. And frankly, a lot of the governor's proposals are like, we're going to pattern our energy off of California. We're going to pattern our taxes off of New York, our economic development subsidies off of these states. And that's, one of the key areas I want to talk about is, what attracts people. We know that lower taxes is attractive to people. It also is generating greater economic growth when you have a lower tax burden. The senator alluded to this of, kind of that multiplier effect of if you put money into the economy, it will, have a multiplier effect. It'll stimulate growth. But really, tax cuts do that much more effectively than government spending. The governor has talked about, well, we don't spend as much as Ohio and other states on economic development. I don't know where he's getting that statistic. It's not accurate. The latest data shows that Pennsylvania is near the top in terms of the economic development subsidies we offer, more than $1 billion a year, and very close to Ohio in terms of how much in overall subsidies and economic development subsidies we have. But picking and choosing winners and losers is not as effective as lowering the tax burden for all Pennsylvanians, all businesses, including our small businesses. Under the income tax, personal income tax, small businesses pay that. Those that are LLCs, family-owned, sole proprietorships, all pay the personal income tax rather than the corporate tax. There's more than, in 2020, there were more than 825 tax filers who were reporting small business income on their tax return. So basically 825,000 small business owners that would be affected by lowering our personal income tax rate to be more competitive. And this is something that is happening across the country. Just this year alone, 14 states have moved to cut their individual income tax rate. So Pennsylvania is, kind of following the trend of what's happening across the country to make our state more competitive and more growth. I did want to talk just a little bit about the impact, the assessment of the tax cuts under House Bill 2388 and Senate Bill 269. We started with calculating that on a per family of 4 basis. That's basically for every 4 people how much that impact is, coming to about $900 per family of 4. Now we use that number to illustrate the effect of having business taxes. Obviously small businesses paying the personal income tax. All businesses are paying the gross receipts tax on their electricity bill. Those savings are passed on. So that's why we started with the per family of 4. I also provided some analysis of what it is, what the impact is going to be for a family at the average income on their own personal tax bill, using some of the income tax data. For a family at the median family income, the overall savings we estimate to be about $560 from this. It's direct savings on their bill and on their personal income tax savings that is going to be able to reinvest in the economy, allowing them that opportunity both on the business side to invest and of course their family savings to afford more things. As we know, that has been, while wages have gone up in Pennsylvania in the last few years, they haven't kept up with inflation. And you just look at, the impact of inflation under President Biden in the last 3+ years. People are poorer. The bite of inflation has taken almost more than $2,000 out of their ability, out of their what their real income is in that time. And this is, I think the term historic tax cuts, just to put it in context, Pennsylvania hasn't reduced its income tax since 1986. And there were 2 increases in that period, one in 1981 under Governor Bob Casey to 2.8%, and then under Governor Edwin Dale to 3.07%. Those are inflection points that Commonwealth has kind of tracked over the years and looked at the income growth, job growth, population growth since 1991 and since 2003. And we've lagged the nation. We've been in the bottom 5 in those categories of growth since those tax increases, and it really has set our state back. But I also believe that we are on the cusp of being able to be more competitive with some of these reforms in reducing our tax burden and some of the other things that have been discussed in the legislature of our regulatory burden and a number of things to make Pennsylvania more economically competitive. So with that, I'm happy to take questions and discuss some of these topics.
Thank you, Mr. Benfield. Members, any questions? Representative Struzzi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I'm trying to wrestle with some of the numbers and try and look, I guess, long-term on what this will mean for Pennsylvania. And I appreciate that we need to give people more money in their wallets sooner rather than later. And I appreciate the proposal before us in the House and in the Senate. But it seems to me $400 is a trip to the grocery store these days. Should we be looking at even more decreases in the PIT over the next few years to make us even more competitive with other states, and looking at how the CNI was decreased only to, CNIT, only to see revenues increase for the Commonwealth? So is there a correlation between further increase in the PIT and in the long run actually seeing revenues in Pennsylvania increase?
Yeah, I certainly think, it's hard to, put a number on that of what kind of the long-term impact is of lowering the CNI or lowering the PIT, and, because of the economic growth that generates having increased revenue. But I do think that is the biggest challenge facing you as lawmakers, is how do we, make Pennsylvania more attractive so that people are moving back to the state, that businesses are moving into the state. Because if we have this out migration and these trends, that just simply exacerbates the cost of government and reduces the taxes that we're generating. Yes, $400, $500, $600 is not a huge amount of money for an individual family, but again, that is money they can use a couple trips to the grocery store. That has a multiplier effect. It goes back into the economy. And it's not that people are going to move based on that kind of tax cuts. No family's like, you know what, I'm going to save $500 versus Pennsylvania versus Ohio, and I'm moving for that reason. But it is adding to the economic competitiveness. Can we go farther? Absolutely. And I think accelerating our CNI reductions to make us more competitive right now. I think the Senator alluded to the net operating loss, which is if you're starting a small business or starting a corporation and lose money, you're not going to be able to deduct all those losses on your future taxes. So it really penalizes those that are starting up. And I think that is where it is. And I know a lot of we talk about the seniors and have we reduced taxes for seniors just in the last budget with the property tax rent and rebate program. We are among the most attractive states for seniors. A lot of the seniors I talk to are concerned about their kids and grandkids moving to other states for better economic opportunity. And so I think as much as we can do across the board to make us more competitive, to your point of going farther, one of the success stories was North Carolina, which cut their taxes, but also put in a trigger that if revenues hit a certain mark, they'll continue to reduce those taxes even farther. I think that's something we could consider in Pennsylvania, that let's reduce the tax rate, and if the revenues are coming in, as they did with the corporate income tax, let's cut them farther. Because I think Milton Friedman said, if you're cutting taxes and getting more revenue, you haven't cut taxes enough.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Benningfield, for being here today. On taxes on energy, so the gross tax receipts as it works with energy, that's one of the Pennsylvanians, what we're paying for energy right now is not just groceries, but everything else, but energy is a big one. Do you have any kind of estimates or projections on the elimination of that tax and what it'll do for Pennsylvanians?
Yeah, the estimate that came out was a little over, 1.3 billion overall of what that collects from the tax, which is imposed on electric generators, but is just passed on your electric bill. It's pretty straightforward.
Correct.
We calculated that in terms of a per household basis, about $230 per household. Again, that will be your own electric bill at your home, but also the what businesses pay on their electric bill is passed on through, again, it's through higher costs. And of course, manufacturers use a lot of electricity, they're paying that tax. So it is a tax on employers and job creators as well. But is, one of those kind of hidden taxes that people don't know about. They don't realize that they're paying a tax in their electric bill, but it is a significant burden, especially as those energy prices have gone up in recent years.
So that would be on top of the 400 estimate on the PIT reduction. So as a package, as we try to institute a package of tax cuts, it can all add together to actually start to create a substantial amount for each family in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and we have, for the average family with the average income, about $560, and for a family of four, that's for, per capita times four.
Thank you, members. And Mr. Benfield, thank you. I just have one or two quick questions here. I'm a map guy, so I really enjoy these maps that you have on page 5 and 6 of your slides, your testimony here. I think it's pretty telling here that if you look around our surrounding states, some of our neighbors to the north and east, where tax policy is probably either the same or worse, that I think House Democrats and the governor are trying to emulate. We have migration there, from there into our state. So, and looking at the next map you have here, I mean, there's a migration clearly to the south. People leaving Pennsylvania to go to states where these income taxes, as you allude to, have either been cut or eliminated in a lot of cases. Texas, North Carolina, those types of places. So, how will a reduction in these taxes make Pennsylvania more competitive? I mean, I think the map demonstrates it pretty well, but how do we realize that when, the governor talks about how he wants to be competitive? You opened up your testimony. How will this make us competitive with other states?
Yeah, I mean, it's multiple ways. One is, the decisions that, starting with businesses make of where to locate. They look at the tax rate, even for what their employees are paying, and that's, it's businesses that are making decisions based on partly what their people have to pay in taxes. It is, more competitive in terms of those who are here and working here, of having more money to spend, having more money in their pockets, and turning those decisions over to the people rather than the government. And I know you guys, are part of the government and decide where money is spent, but frankly, the decisions are better made when they're left to the citizens and families and businesses themselves, and that is part of more, the competitive nature. It also is part of sending a message, and Pennsylvania has a reputation of not being competitive on tax policy, on regulation, on energy. And there's a lot of uncertainty out there, frankly. And so I think, the tax reforms are a part of the picture, but they aren't the entire picture. I think addressing some of our regulatory burden and getting rid of that uncertainty, like that businesses know that the corporate income tax is going to continue to be reduced, that they know there's not a threat of a carbon tax, which has certainly been a threat for a lot of businesses, that they know that Pennsylvania's on track to reduce its income tax. Those are the types of things that businesses make decisions. Families make decisions less on taxes, but certainly look at that, but really look at the opportunities that are available to them in terms of jobs and economic opportunity. The states that have cut taxes have seen tremendous job growth, and that's where younger working age families are moving.
I appreciate that. And any other follow-up questions? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just, I think just to be clear, we're not talking about drawing down the rainy day fund or the surplus that the state has. We're talking about reducing taxes moving forward because we are generating enough revenues to do that. Just so, I think it's important that people understand that, because I think it's very important that we continue to maintain the rainy day fund and the surplus in the event that we do have an economic downturn. But what we're talking about here is a fundamental change in income taxes on families, so that moving forward in Pennsylvania, we do become more competitive because families will have more money in their pockets, right?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things, in comparison to the governor's, spending increases, the tax proposals in this bill be a $1.3 billion impact estimated, and this is a static impact, so it's not and then $3 billion in future years. The governor's spending increases was $4.3 billion this year, about $6 billion next year, and creating deficits of $3 billion, $4 billion, $5 billion in the next few years, which would in fact drain the state reserves and drain the rainy day fund. We argue that's illegal. The state law says you can't take the rainy day fund unless there is a recession or emergency and requiring 2/3 votes. He thinks we should just spend that and bring
Right.
it down to zero. But yeah, this is aimed at, we need to keep a balanced budget or pretty close to it. I know there's probably going to be a deficit this year, but we'd like to see that budget brought into balance in the next couple of years so that we are not looking to drain the rainy day fund or needing a tax increase in future years. But putting more money back in the hands of families, back in the hands of businesses to help generate that economic growth that we need for the long term.
And is it fair to say that we are in this position to be able to even offer this tax cut because of prudent Republican budgets over the past 5-6 years?
Yeah, that would be very accurate. That we've had some success in putting money in the rainy day fund. It's actually something like a 23,000% increase in the rainy day fund because we were down to zero and couldn't afford, if there was a recession, to put it in where we're now a little bit better than the national average, but it's not an excessive amount in that rainy day fund. We have prevented a lot of tax hikes that were proposed under Governor Wolf, I think defeating 11 different proposed tax hikes, and bringing spending, in line a little bit. I mean, I think we're probably still spending too much, especially on seeing the growth in some of the social welfare programs, but has certainly been, preventing the massive deficits that were proposed and preventing the tax hikes that were proposed, and setting aside money for the future, knowing that the federal aid that came in was temporary. We're now on more solid ground to be able to address that now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Struzzi. And I want to thank our testifiers again, Senator Rothman and Mr. Benningfield, for being here and sharing their insight. I think we learned a lot today. I think our approach is simple, though, is that your money is better off in your pocket. It's simple. Government has taken a lot of money, and it's time that we make the right choice for taxpayers and put money back in their pockets through these historic tax cuts. I think it makes sense. It's a way to do it broadly and also generate economic growth and be competitive in this country. So I appreciate your testimony. Our next meeting is scheduled for next Thursday. We're on the road again, June 13th, for a hearing on Democrats' education funding scheme fails to fund students. And this series on historic tax cuts will come back, and it'll be next Monday, June 17th. Thank you for everybody's time.